So now we go to the next Rashi that I wanted to focus on. Again, a very, very, very powerful Rashi. It says, "Vayidaber Hashem Moshe ve'Aaron vayitzavema b'nei Yisrael ve'Paro melech Mitzrayim." And Hashem spoke to Moses and Aaron, and he commanded them to the children of Israel and to Paro, the king of Egypt, Motziet b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. So Hashem spoke to Moses and Aaron, and he commanded them to the children of Israel and to Paro to lead them forth from the land of Egypt. But the question is, Vayitzavem el b'nei Israel, commanded them to the children of Israel. What did he command? What did Hashem command? What did Hashem command them to the children of Israel? I understand what Hashem could have commanded to Paro. He said to Paro, lead them forth from Egypt. That's chapter 6, verse 13. Fine, I understand that. But what was commanded to the children of Israel? So Rashi reads this as, Rashi says it refers to, Tzivam aleim lanigim benachas v'lespotam. Rashi says it's not a commandment to do something to the children of Israel. It's a commandment to act in a certain way with respect to the children of Israel. It's a commandment to act with patience, with nachas. Nachas here means calmness. Hashem is commanding them to be patient with the children of Israel. That's what Rashi says. Rashi says it means, to be patient. But every time I read this Rashi, I'm reminded, every time I read this pasuk, I'm reminded of the Yerushalmi. What does the Jerusalem Talmud say? The Jerusalem Talmud says that it means, the Jerusalem Talmud says that there was an actual command given to the children of Israel. This was the very first mitzvah. Now, to be fair, the very actual first mitzvah was written in the Torah, which was Parshas HaChodesh, which is the commandment of Rosh Chodesh. But here's a mitzvah which is not yet even written in the Torah, but there's a tradition amongst the rabbis that this was a mitzvah which was commanded. Meaning to say, before they could even get the mitzvah of sanctifying the new moon, the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh, they actually had to get this mitzvah. And what mitzvah was that? What mitzvah were they commanded at this time? They were commanded with the mitzvah, according to the Jerusalem Talmud, of the moon. No, the moon. The mitzvah of the moon was the first commandment that they were going to receive. That's in chapter 12, next week's parsha. But before they could get the mitzvah of the moon, they had to do something else. Hashem gave them a commandment before they could even get to the mitzvah of the moon. They had to do a prerequisite before they could even be able to come to the level of getting a mitzvah. And what is that? What mitzvah? So the Jerusalem Talmud says Hashem commanded them to free their own slaves, that they had their own Hebrew slaves in Egypt. And before they could be able to receive their own mitzvah to serve Hashem, they had to free their own slaves. They had to free their own slaves. This is completely shocking. This is the first time I heard this. This was completely shocking to me. But that's the way the Talmud understands it, that when the children of Israel were in Egypt, they were enslaved, but they also had their own slaves. And it makes sense, in every society, even as we go to the lower classes, the classes that are working, and mistreated, they're also mistreating others. And so Hashem is saying to them, according to this midrash, the Talmud is telling us, if you want to be released, if you want to be redeemed, you have to first look within yourself and see if you've done everything that you're asking, if you've done to others what you're asking Hashem to do to you. If you want to be redeemed, then will you be capable? are you currently mistreating others? And the answer was that the Jewish people were not even capable of being redeemed until they released their own slaves. That was the first message. And unfortunately, it has, it's not an isolated incident. The Jewish people were not always on the right side of history when it comes to racial issues, and it comes to the case of mistreating people. When we went to Selma, some of the people on this call traveled together as a community with me to Selma, Alabama, and we spent Shabbat there, and we prayed in a synagogue in Selma, Alabama called Mishkan Israel. It's a very nice synagogue. It's now basically the only members there are like Christian, actually. I mean, they're keeping it up because they're historically Jewish, but they're not really. It's not really a functioning synagogue. When we were there, they had some groups once in a while come in, but the rabbi of that synagogue, when there was the march of they went to the march across the M. Pettus Bridge, he was told by his board, if you march, you're out of a job. If you support it, you're out of a job. And I remember that when we were taking around Selma by a woman who's now an older woman, but at the time she was a little girl, she remembered that the Jewish community did not support them. Now, I know that there were many Jews who did support the civil rights movement and Jews who gave their life for the civil rights movement. But there were also many Jews, especially in the South, who did not support the civil rights movement. And, Rabbi Dr. Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was a supporter of the civil rights movement, who was very active in support of the civil rights movement, he was severely criticized by his own colleagues at the Jewish Theological Seminary, and one of them said to him, "What's a rabbi doing? What's a rabbi doing on Saturday morning marching across a bridge? The rabbi's supposed to be in synagogue praying on Shabbat." And Rabbi Heschel said to him, I was praying with my feet. I remember when I was at Ohev Shalom that on one Shabbat morning, I also went on a march to March for Our Lives. There were teenagers from our shul who were going to march for to try and bring more sensible laws about guns in our country. And I remember that line came to mind. Hold on, let me just stop this recording for a second.